Imagine an army where everyone had to act like a perfectly synchronized machine. That's exactly how it was with Roman soldiers. Each legionary had to learn to fight the same way, shield always on the left arm, sword in the right hand. And this wasn't by accident. It was strategy. In battle, a soldier's shield protected the left side of the comrade next to him, creating a solid barrier. Now think about what would happen if someone decided to reverse that logic. A left-handed soldier, for example, would disrupt the entire formation, not because he was worse, but because he'd put everyone's safety at risk. That's why many experts believe that left-handers, even if they existed, were trained to fight like right-handers. There wasn't much choice. In Rome, discipline and unity came before personal preference. War wasn't a place for individuality. It was where order decided who lived and who died. YouTube only spreads this video to more people if there's a lot of interaction. In other words, without your comment, this knowledge could be buried and never reach those who need it. If this content made sense to you, comment 1. If you disagree, comment 0 and tell me why. I want to see at least 100 comments here so YouTube understands that this topic needs to be shared. So comment now and be part of this mission to reveal the secrets of ancient Rome. Now let's continue. Within a legion, every movement was trained until it became instinct. It was like a choreographed dance, but with armor, spears, and shields. In that logic, there was no room for improvisation, and that included even the hand used to fight. When a recruit arrived at the training camp, it didn't matter if he had been left-handed since birth. He had to adapt. Roman instructors were strict. If you were left-handed, you learned to use your right hand. Simple as that. Not out of cruelty, but out of strategy. A soldier out of sync put everyone at risk. That's why the legion functioned like a single body, where every arm and every step was synchronized. And those who didn't fit in were molded until they did. Here's the curious part. Historical records about left-handers in the Roman army are very scarce, almost as if the topic had been erased. But that also reveals something interesting. Either they were rare, or they were so well trained to look like right-handers that no one noticed. Still, we know there have always been people who operate outside the norm, and Rome had plenty of them. Some scholars believe that in specific cases, like duels or one-on-one combat outside the main formation, a left-hander could even have an advantage, since the enemy wouldn't be used to facing someone like that. But within the legion, where the group mattered more than individual talent, that advantage became a problem. So even if a soldier fought better with his left hand, he probably had to keep that to himself. After all, survival depended on discipline, not personal preference. The truth is, the Roman army wasn't a club where you got to choose how you participated. It was a war system, designed to crush enemies with mathematical precision. If a left-handed soldier simply couldn't adapt to the standard formation, he had two options: either train until he could, or be dismissed. The legion couldn't risk the safety of dozens of men because of one rebellious arm. But Rome was also practical. If that recruit showed value in other areas, like construction, logistics, or even as an archer, he could be reassigned. After all, a soldier didn't only make a difference on the front lines. Many who didn't serve as legionaries became auxiliaries, part of the support troops that were crucial to military campaigns. In other words, even a stubborn lefty could find his place in the army. But when it was time for combat, you either marched like everyone else, or got left behind. Good question. When it comes to the daily life of regular soldiers, especially something like being left-handed, ancient Roman documents are almost completely silent. Writers of that time focused on recording victories, glorious campaigns, emperors, but not details like how a recruit held his sword. Yet that silence says a lot. If there had been a famous legion made up of left-handers, it would have become part of history. The lack of mention shows everything was standardized. That's why historians look to indirect evidence, like sculptures, frescoes, ancient military instructions, and even training manuals. In all of them, soldiers are shown with the shield on the left, weapon on the right, without exception. This suggests that if there were left-handers, they fit into the system so well that they left no visible trace. It's as if Rome erased individuality in the name of something greater, the absolute power of the legion. Think about it. If you've spent your whole life writing, eating, and holding things with your left hand, changing that overnight isn't easy. But in Rome, legionary training was so intense, so repetitive, that the body eventually obeyed. It was like erasing one habit and overwriting it with another. Instructors weren't there to ask if it was comfortable for you. They were there to turn peasants into war machines. Natural instinct was suppressed by force. March, attack, defend. Everything was rehearsed until it became automatic. Of course, in the beginning, it must have been hell for left-handers. But over time, the mind and body adapted. Many became practically ambidextrous out of necessity, not by choice, but because survival depended on it. The Roman army didn't care how you arrived, only if you could fight like one of them. And if you couldn't, you learned the hard way. Now, in civilian Roman life, the story was a bit different. Even though Roman society placed a high value on order and tradition, prejudice against left-handers wasn't as extreme as in some other parts of the ancient world. Still, the left hand was associated with negative things. The Latin word sinistra, meaning left, also gave rise to the word sinister in our language. Coincidence? Not really. Many people saw the left as unlucky or strange. That did affect how left-handers were viewed, but not to the point of persecution. The issue was that most tools, weapons, and customs were designed with right-handers in mind, so lefties were forced to adapt, both in war and in daily life. The Roman world wasn't built for them, but those who wanted to survive learned to play by the rules. Because in Rome, if you didn't fit in, you were left behind. Comparing Rome to other armies of the time helps us understand just how rigid the Roman system was. For example, among the Celts and Gauls, peoples whom the Romans fought in many battles, being left-handed wasn't a big issue. Many warriors fought individually, each with their own style. There was no tight formation like in the legions. That allowed left-handers to use their difference as a surprise advantage. Among the Greeks, especially in the Spartan phalanx, things were more like Rome. Tight formation, shield on the left arm, spear in the right. But even there were reports of soldiers who fought differently, especially outside the main line. So while Rome prioritized absolute discipline, other cultures allowed a bit more flexibility. In the end, the rules were shaped by the type of warfare each civilization chose, and Rome bet on the machine, not individual creativity. It may seem like we're only talking about the past, but this story of left-handers in Rome says a lot about how societies still deal with difference today. The truth is, the Roman Empire was a machine for shaping people. You entered as a regular citizen and came out as a cog in the system. It didn't matter where you came from, how you were, or even which hand you used. What mattered was whether you could fit in. Now think about that in the modern world. How many times are we still forced to adapt to systems that weren't made for us? How many times are unique talents trimmed just to follow a norm? Rome teaches us a lot, not just about war and discipline, but about the cost of erasing individuality for the sake of structure. And maybe by looking at this story, we realize that valuing what's different isn't weakness, it's intelligence, because someone who thinks differently isn't always a problem. Sometimes, they're exactly the solution. The most honest answer? Probably yes. But they had to give up something deeply personal to be part of that war machine. Being left-handed in Rome wasn't impossible. It was just invisible. And that says a lot about the world they built. A civilization that lasted centuries, but to function, demanded everyone march the same way. Literally, the story of left-handers in the legions is small, almost erased, but it reveals what Rome valued most: obedience, discipline, and uniformity. Now, if this video made you think, leave a like. That tells YouTube it's worth sharing this kind of content. And if you want to keep uncovering the hidden secrets of the Roman Empire, there's a video on the screen right now that will blow your mind. Click it. You'll understand why some stories were hidden for centuries. See you in the next video.